Jupiter isn't angry. It doesn't hate you. It doesn't chase you. It doesn't even notice you. But some places don't kill you. They rewrite you. And the first thing Jupiter rewrites is your belief that nature will ever negotiate. You came here thinking the danger would have a face, a storm, a lightning strike, a sudden malfunction in the dark. That is how we tell stories about planets, as if they're villains with moods. But Jupiter doesn't need moods. It has mass, it has spin, it has a gravity field so clean it feels like a verdict. At the 1 bar level, where we pretend Jupiter has a surface, the effective pull is about 23.12 meters per second squared, roughly 2.36 times what you feel on Earth. Escape velocity is about 59.5 kilometers per second. Those are not threats, those are statements. This tape is about what happens when you discover the difference between danger and inevitability, not the monster planet, the honest law. You are on the inbound trajectory with your hands off the mythology and on the math. The ship's nav computer speaks in vectors and tolerances, and you trust it because it has never lied to you. It cannot. The Jovian system is a machine room where the machinery is visible. Jupiter turns beneath you in under 10 hours, a day that lasts about 9.93 hours, spinning fast enough to flatten itself and tug its own atmosphere into bands. At the top of that atmosphere, temperatures hover around 165 Kelvin near the 1 bar level, cold enough to make your breath feel expensive, even through the suit's filters, if you let your mind pretend the cold can reach you. Your mission is simple in a way that should have been comforting. A close pass, a release, a measurement. Drop a hardened probe into the upper layers, skim the boundary where cloud becomes depth, map the gravity anomalies the way Juno did, listen to the subtle Doppler shifts that tell you what mass is doing when you can't see it. The hazard brief is equally simple. Radiation. Jupiter's magnetosphere is not a metaphor. It is a field of trapped particles that turns space into something that can bruise electronics. Juno's engineers compared the total exposure over the mission to more than 100 million dental X-rays. So your ship carries its own kind of armor. Sensitive systems nested behind titanium, circuits thickened against single-event upsets, redundancy stacked like prayers. You are prepared for violence. You are not prepared for honesty. It starts with a number that refuses to look dramatic. A correction burn, small and precise, the kind you barely feel. The ship is heavy with fuel you do not want to spend, so you let Jupiter help. Gravity assists are the oldest trick in deep space, the polite way of borrowing energy from a planet that will never miss it. Your perijove drops by a few kilometers, a rounding error in human terms, a rounding error that becomes a corridor in Jupiter terms. The nav computer flags it, then clears it. The corridor is still within limits. Limits, you learn, are stories we tell ourselves about continuous functions. You come in over the planet's limb, and the first thing you see is not the great red spot, not the bands, not the familiar photographs. It is the way the atmosphere refuses to have an edge. There is no line where space ends and Jupiter begins. There is only density increasing, layer by layer, until the math admits you are inside. Your instruments confirm what your eyes cannot process. Wind fields in the cloud tops that can reach around 150 meters per second in the lower latitudes, streams of gas moving like conveyor belts, and then the red spot itself, a wound-colored oval with winds that can exceed 400 miles per hour along its outer rim. It is beautiful in the way a hurricane is beautiful from orbit, a pattern with no sympathy. The ship dips, 1 more kilometer, another. The gravimeter doesn't spike. It doesn't need to. It stays steady, almost boring, because Jupiter is not dramatic.
The pull is consistent, and that consistency is the trap. You cannot argue with a constant, you can only budget for it. Drag begins as a whisper. A thin skim of molecules that would be nothing near Earth becomes significant at orbital speed. The ship's skin warms, not from fire, but from friction, and the thermal maps bloom in careful colors. You order a burn to raise your path. The engines respond. The trajectory responds too, but not the way you want. You gain altitude and lose time, a trade you didn't notice you were making until the numbers show you the next pass. Jupiter rotates under you while you fight. The target point moves. The bands slide. Your up becomes a moving reference frame. And the nav computer, still honest, updates the truth. You are captured, not by a hand, by an equation. Your energy is now negative relative to Jupiter. You belong to it, unless you spend a ridiculous amount of propellant to leave. You think of escape velocity, 59.5 kilometers per second, and you realize what it means here. It is not the speed you need right now, it is the scale of the cage. Radiation rises as you dip closer to the belts. It is invisible, but it announces itself as noise in sensors, as bit flips corrected by error coding that suddenly starts working overtime. The ship's shielding does what it can, the way Juno's titanium vault was meant to protect its electronics, but protection is not immunity. You feel the environment chewing at the edges of reliability. A warning appears, then disappears, then appears again in a different subsystem. You do not panic because you are not being attacked, you are being exposed. You try to turn the story back into a story. You tell yourself the planet is angry, because anger implies intention, and intention implies you can bargain. But gravity does not bargain. Gravity integrates. Your orbit behaves in millimeters per second squared, patiently, like a clock. On the next perijove, you enter the upper atmosphere deeper than planned. The ship shudders, a vibration that is not a failure, but a measurement. The atmosphere is now thick enough to push back. The worst part is that nothing is surprising. Every sensor is a witness. Every prediction is accurate. The ship is dying on schedule.
You cross the 1 bar level, the place where fact sheets draw a radius and call it a day. The pressure outside is what you used to call normal. The word means nothing here. The pull at this level is still around 23 meters per second squared, still about 2.36 G effective at the equator, and your body could survive it if you were standing on something. But there is nothing to stand on. Jupiter offers you only more. The atmosphere thickens into something that behaves less like air and more like a fluid with moods, and that is where the planet starts to feel alive, even though it isn't. The winds do not choose to slam you sideways, they simply exist, and you are now inside them. Your ship tries to climb and cannot, not because gravity suddenly became stronger, but because you are losing velocity to drag faster than you can replace it. Your engines are working against a sink that grows deeper with every meter. For a moment, you remember the Galileo atmospheric probe, how it hit Jupiter's air at about 170,590 kilometers per hour, and how the deceleration peaked around 350 G. That probe lasted about an hour, long enough to send back a short weather report from hell before heat and pressure ended the conversation. You are not built like a one-shot probe. You are a home. That is the difference. You have more systems to fail, more seams to peel, more places for reality to enter. The hull temperature climbs. The noise floor on the comms rises. The star tracker loses stars, not because the stars are gone, but because the sky is now bright with scattered cloud light and electrical storms you cannot see through the thickening haze. Lightning flashes somewhere below, and you feel it as electromagnetic interference, a spike that makes the ship twitch like a nerve. You try one last burn, not to escape, but to change the angle, to find a thinner path out. The engines light, the thrust vector points, the ship responds. And Jupiter responds too, because it was always responding. Not with malice, with conservation laws. You trade heat for hope, you trade fuel for seconds.
The altitude stops falling for a heartbeat. Then the numbers update again. You are still descending, just more politely. This is the part where you understand the title. Jupiter isn't angry. Gravity is just honest. It tells you what your body cannot accept, that you can be alive, conscious, and still already lost. That falling is not an event here, it is a state.
Communication becomes a negotiation with error correction. Words arrive with missing letters, then missing seconds. The ship's clock drifts as radiation and thermal stress make timekeeping feel like a suggestion. Outside, the pressure climbs beyond the comfortable metaphors. Fact sheets say the surface pressure is much greater than 100 bars, and you finally understand why the symbol matters. Greater than, not a number, a direction. The temperature rises as you sink, and the atmosphere stops being a place you can imagine breathing in any way, even through filters, even through fiction. Hydrogen and helium dominate, and the deeper you go, the more gas giant feels like a prank name for an ocean that happens to be made of the wrong stuff. Somewhere far below, Jupiter's hydrogen is believed to become metallic, a phase where pressure turns matter into something that conducts like a metal. This is a hypothesis for the deep interior, inferred from gravity, magnetic fields, and models, not something you can watch with your eyes. But you don't need to see it to fear it. You only need to feel the direction of the pull, unwavering, patient. The ship's systems begin to shut down in a cascade that looks like surrender. First, the instruments you don't need, then the ones you promised you did, then the ones you thought were too important to fail. The last thing that keeps working is the gravimeter, because gravity is not something you measure, it is something you are inside of. You record a final packet, not a distress call, not a plea, a fact. Your acceleration, your depth, your decay rate. Honesty, delivered as data. If you ever tell this story, someone will ask what the monster was. They will want a single culprit, a face, a sound in the dark. You will want to give them one, because it makes the universe feel manageable. But Jupiter never hated you. It never had to. It simply kept its mass where it was, kept turning at about 9.93 hours per rotation, kept holding on to anything that came too close, unless it arrived with the speed to leave. It kept its laws intact. And that is the dread. Not chaos, not evil. Consistency. Science you can hear. Dread you can feel. If you want the next tape, subscribe. The archive keeps growing. Because somewhere out there is another place that isn't cruel, just honest. Would you turn back? Yes or no?